Hey guys, how you doing? It's Joe and Jesse here from Impala Search. We're here to introduce the Impala Invites webinar series. In today's episode, Impala are inviting Adriana from N26. She's a tech recruitment partner there. Adriana, do you want to give us a quick intro?
Hey everyone. Hey Joe, Jesse. I'm originally from Bulgaria, but I've been in Berlin for now more than 6 years. And currently, I think in more or less 2.5 years or so, I've been with N26 as a tech recruiting partner. So I did join as a junior. And prior to that, I was working with Raisin, another FinTech in Berlin, where I did my internship and kind of grow from there. So that's, I guess, quickly about me.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining us as well. Obviously, we know that you've progressed in your career, which is really cool. I think Jesse's going to kick us off to find out a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I think, thanks for introducing yourself, Adriana. I think firstly, it'd be good just to get a bit of insight into exactly what's expected of you in your role as an internal recruiter, both at N26 and in general, really.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea because I don't have the experience of, let's say, working in an agency or being, a headhunter or external recruiter in this sense. So I only see it from internally. What really made it great for me was that you have the ownership of everything, right? Like you partner with the business. Your main goal is that everyone that you bring into the business, they will deliver and scale the business forward. So I think that's one of the, let's say, key differences that as an internal recruiter, you need to care about the product and the business that you're working for.
Yeah, definitely. I think being passionate about what you do is incredibly important. And I think you sort of touched on it in the past as well. The way in which you sort of view yourself and your importance to the company, ultimately you're getting in the best talent that's ultimately going to push the company forward, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. And in terms of sort of N26, or maybe in FinTech in general, I know you worked at Raisin in the past. What's your experience there? Would you say that that's different to other tech companies and working as an internal recruiter in, let's say, an e-commerce firm or another tech company?
Well, my experience is quite tightly to FinTech indeed, which it has its pros and cons. So FinTech is definitely a very interesting field. And when you're recruiting for tech, it's a very attractive field as well for a lot of different reasons, right? Just because the challenges for tech people is also much more different in a way. And you need to balance very often between what is attractive for tech people. Right? And then you have this battle between, okay, for business, with FinTech, you want these people with finance background, but then from tech, you want people that want to be innovative and creative. Yeah. So it was always been interesting. But with Raisin and N26, they were kind of similar, but very different in its own ways because they were different in their journey and their growth and scale.
Definitely. I think definitely, but I think you also mentioned, how do you make that attractive to tech people? And I guess knowledge is power in that way. I just wondered, when you started out as an internal recruiter, how did you gain this knowledge? Was this for other people, learning on the job? How did you get to grips with the different technologies that exist and are always changing?
Yeah, well, the best thing was about staying curious and learning by doing. So I remember, I started my internship, and on my first day, I needed to write a job description for WordPress developer, right? And then I was like, okay, what is WordPress? And I didn't have any experience. The only thing I knew about recruitment or HR in general was from university, and it was very theory based. Right. And then I joined in this fast-paced company. Everyone is young. Everyone is, super cool and fun. And then suddenly, WordPress. Okay, what is that? Right. So I needed to just going around the office and asking engineers to explain me, what is backend, what is front end, what is infrastructure, what is agile, Scrum, Kanban, all of those things. So this kind of curiosity helped me forward. So I was reading a lot. I was reading what other companies are doing, how other companies are writing their job descriptions. So this was a bit of the starting point, I think, for me getting the terminology right.
I think that's a good thing you mentioned. So having that natural curiosity, would you say that curiosity is the reason why you've progressed and done as well as you have done?
I would say that it's been one of the main reasons. The other part, of course, you need to have certain skills. And being a recruiter, there are a lot of skills that are also kind of transferable. So no matter if you've done something else in the past or you want to even change from being a recruiter to something else, there are skills like, time management and coordination, organizational skills, right? Communication in general, that were quite helpful to have the basis out of. So yeah, having an understanding of that was definitely crucial to learn things from the
Yeah, I
beginning.
think time management's huge. It's one of the things I probably struggle with, as I know it's completely different being an agency recruiter, but there's always so much going on. You're balancing plates. With the things that you learned then, like you say, so this time management, what would you say is the most important thing that you have learned that's, I suppose, been a key identifier in your career?
Yeah, so I've always been very organized myself, I think. So what really helped me from the beginning, so in Raisin, we didn't have any scheduling help, right? So everything was kind of manual. So I had all those like notes, like sticking on my laptop and everything about like where when I'm contacting candidates for, the scheduling certain interviews. And then later in N26, we are lucky to actually have a scheduling robot to help us with at least the screening calls. But then, having those, like, you have all the time reminders in Greenhouse or whatever applicant tracking system you have. You utilize Google Calendar, you utilize your notes if you prefer writing on paper. So find what works best for you. For me, so it's a combination of both, and I do overutilize Greenhouse reminders, I have to say.
Plugging Greenhouse on the podcast there, all the systems you can use, guys. You've obviously touched on a few things. I think one thing we kind of brushed over, if we go back to the start, is being this, I suppose, brand ambassador as an internal recruiter for, I suppose, the businesses that you work for. And I suppose that goes one internally when attracting talent, but also with the candidate journey and I suppose how you come across to them. So how important is being that brand ambassador, would you say?
It's one of the most important things. And this is not only me as a recruiter being a brand ambassador. Everyone in the interview process, everyone that has a contact with the candidates is a brand ambassador, right? So it's about also educating the people that get involved in the process, what they should say or not say as well. And also, employer brand isn't it very often tightly connected with the product brand, like with brand itself, but sometimes not as much, because for example with Raisin, it was a product that is more tailored toward like the older generation. It's about savings and investments, right? But then we wanted to attract younger people within the tech industry. With N26, it's probably a bit easier. So I think 90% of the candidates that I speak to are N26 customers or plan to be N26 customers or know someone who is a customer. So the brand was already quite strong there, and it's just making sure that the employer brand is strong as well.
And in that case, Adriana, what would you say the difference between them and Raisin are? Because obviously, N26 is a pretty big company that lots of people use as for their banking. But when you were sort of speaking and screening with candidates for Raisin, how did you sort of make them interested? What exactly were the engineers looking to hear? What would your tips and advice be here?
Oh man, it was a long time ago. I wish I can remember my pitch back then, like as a recruiter, you always need to have a pitch.
Of course.
But I think it's about that even though they might not be a direct customer, what they would impact, like the customers they would impact, is quite crucial. So having that understanding, and of course for tech people, sometimes they don't care as much about the business. They do care about the technical challenges they have to solve. So it's about basically providing them the cool infrastructure to work with, or even if it's, let's say, a legacy infrastructure, how can they make it better? So that was some of the selling points, I think, back then. For N26, it's a combination of both, actually.
Nice. No, this is all really, really interesting stuff. And I think just to sort of move on from the sort of development and the sort of skills that you acquired, what would you say your sort of biggest success story, or the thing that happened in the first few months as an internal recruiter that made you think, this is the job for me, and this is something that I really enjoy doing?
That's an interesting question. I do, when I go back to my first 6 months of an internship with Raisin, it's like, wow, it was like magic. Kind of getting involved with more and more different various roles, speaking to more and more different people. So it was like everything was new back then, even the whole notion of people having to relocate, going through visa processes. How do we make candidate experience better? How do you even how do I learn myself how to interview?
Yeah.
Or how to basically do interview processes, how to start utilizing data as well. Success story.
So with that, then I suppose if we go back to the success story in a second. So you mentioned obviously then learning how to interview. How do you teach somebody how to interview?
That's a very interesting topic that I'm passionate about at the moment, because I'm driving interview trainings in N26 actually.
Okay.
So it's one thing, it's to get the basics out there, as in what are types of interviewing techniques, what do you look for, the whole notion of competencies, what are biases and how do they come up in interviewing, how to provide good feedback, the logistics behind it, how to work with the applicant tracking system, those type of things. So if you get that training across already, that's good. The other thing that I've always find helpful is, like, even when I was starting interviewing, I was shadowing my colleague back then. Then they shadowed me. So they gave me some tips and tricks on how to do. And that's what I always encourage the employees in N26 to do as well, to gain that experience by shadowing or reverse shadowing.
Yeah. With those tips and tricks, then, have you got any that you'd want to share with us, or do you keep them close to your chest?
Well, those are my tips and tricks. Shadow and reverse shadow,
Yeah.
But the more, it's like riding a bicycle, I guess, or just every other skill. The more you interview, the better you get, because the more different situations you fall into. So at the beginning, it's going to be rocky. Another thing is, especially if you start interviewing for a new position, right, or for a position that you haven't recruited before, I do get nervous every time I have to do it. It's like, oh, whoa, what are the things that I need to ask?
Yeah.
What should I look for? So get your pitch ready. First of all, like, have an understanding of what the team looks like. What are, with regards to tech recruiting, what are the technologies, kind of do the selling part of it, and have an idea of what questions you want to ask, and then just kind of go with it. And the first times you might fail and be awkward, but then you'll get there.
I think that was like us on our first podcast, in all honesty, Adriana. Me and Jesse didn't know how to speak to each other. So I can definitely relate to that. But with interviews, I know this is something that was quite big for myself, but I don't know if it was for you as well. Like, what was that first, I suppose, candidate rejection call like, or when you had to say to a candidate they weren't right? Because that can be quite a daunting experience for, I suppose, a new recruiter. So how was that for you?
Yeah, rejection calls, or any time you need to provide feedback that is not necessarily positive, it's always hard, right? Not even if it comes to interviewing, it can be to a colleague of yours. So in Raisin, I was a bit lucky that a lot of the hiring managers were taking the responsibility for it. So they were actually doing the offer and feedback calls, and they were making even the offer calls as well.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time I had to deliver a feedback call within N26, it was like, I think, my first rejection. And I was about to cry. The candidate was about to cry. I still remember literally like me sitting in that phone booth and just like figuring out how to say things out loud. What really helped me is that the hiring team provided very good feedback as well. Like, they provided very constructive feedback and recommendations for how the candidates can progress further. So it's actually also a success story, because this candidate, 6 months later, they reapplied and they got hired. So it was a very interesting journey in this sense. And sometimes, even now, I do have a lot of feedback calls that I'm very nervous in general giving out, especially when it's not the hard skills part. It's really hard to deliver feedback to someone when it's more related to, not fitting the company culture, or just,
Definitely.
part.
I completely agree with that. It's probably one of the hardest pieces of feedback to give. I think all engineers really love when you give them detailed technical feedback. It's something that they enjoy, especially when they've invested time into the process. But how do you deal with giving rejections based on sort of soft skills or cultural fits, Adriana? Because that is a difficult subject.
I do try to combine it a lot still with hard skills to make it more digestible for them as well. But the other notion is, kind of understanding that them to take it with a pinch of salt, right?
Yeah.
So not take it completely right away, understand that it can be a bit subjective and based on also assumptions that we've had during the process, and also understand that it's not directly even to them, it's just be the way of our culture is.
Yeah.
And all the things that we share with them, as in this is how you don't fit, it doesn't mean that they won't fit another organization as well, right? So
I think that
kind of
like
turn
you
it
say,
around.
it isn't a personal attack. It is just that the business also isn't right for them. It's a two-way thing, isn't it?
Exactly.
A lot of these tips that you're giving, I think that they're really useful, especially for, I suppose, recruiters coming in and starting off. But I think one thing that impressed both myself and Jesse with your career, Adriana, is how, I suppose, quickly you have progressed. And I suppose what I wanted to understand is, with your progression, the opportunities for your promotions, have you taken them in terms of, have you gone out and sought them? Have they been handed to you? Why do you think you've progressed so quickly?
So there was a lot of me being passionate about getting, like, it's also a bit of a personal thing that I'm a bit of a perfectionist myself. But for a lot of people, it might be that they might need just the right support or the right people to learn from. So, with N26, it was a very small team. We were like, towards one point, we were 2 recruiters and then our head of HR as well. And I was taking only part of like the tech recruitment side of things, but it was about kind of learning by doing and making mistakes by doing so. And then in N26, suddenly there was already an environment with very strong recruiters. So I could kind of see and learn from them as well. And we always love to talk about what would you do in this situation? What do you think is the best way to do in this situation? Nothing was really given to me, as in there were not a lot of documentation and processes in place or trainings in place on how to do things. It was just about from discussion and doing it. And one thing that, especially someone who starts their journey, like, of course you would lack confidence and you would lack a bit of experience, but what is important is to learn that it's okay to make mistakes, and those mistakes, like, it's fine, right? Nothing is very crucial. It's not going to be the end of everything. And only by that you will really get better.
I've got to ask you on this one, Adriana, and you might want to swerve the question, but what would you say is the biggest mistake you've made? I know I'm putting you on the spot there, but I've got to ask.
I've been asked this so many times. To be fair, I can't think of anything that was a bit up to now that I say I might regret it or it's gone very badly. I think all of those, like, maybe little mistakes of like sending something wrong to the wrong candidate, or forgetting. Oh, I did have a couple of cases where I forget to send a confirmation email, for example, and the candidates don't show up on the team interview. And things like this. And then it's just about kind of apologizing and correcting yourself. So
what would you say is the best way to manage those mistakes then? Because like you say, they do happen.
Like, accept that they've happened and be creative about it, how to learn from them, I guess. And like, don't start like apologizing and telling everyone, oh, I'm so weak, I made this mistake, I did that wrong. But more of like, okay, I did that, now what do I do to make it better? Like, what can I do? And ask advice if you need to, but in general, own your mistakes.
Okay, so you
mentioned and don't blame it on other things as well, right? Or not, or on other situations that were not under, like,
definitely. No, I completely agree with that. You mentioned there, I think something that's really probably vital, I suppose, asking for advice. What would you say is the best piece of advice that you've been given in your career so far?
This will kind of contradict with what I said just now, which was more in the lines of don't apologize.
Okay.
But no, so this is just the very direct one. The reality was that earlier in my career, when I was also very young and still a bit immature and more emotional. So when something happened wrong, or there was some misunderstanding with hiring managers or so, and I would go around and be like, oh, I'm really sorry that this happened. Like, let's try to work around it, and kind of looking like a bit of a weaker than I am, is in lacking that confidence in me, which ends up you losing a bit of trust from your stakeholders.
Okay.
So it was more in the line of still accept that you've made a mistake, but don't like apologize once and that's it, right? Like don't keep coming back to it and be like, oh, 2 months ago I did that. I'm still very sorry about this. So basically getting that confidence, even if you don't have it yet, act confident, and no one will really question it at the end. So
Did you?
just to kind of add on this, because this happened, I was young girl in a very male dominant environment as well. So because of that, you did need to have a bit of like drive and confidence.
So it's pushing it out there, making sure, like you say, owning it. I think is a big thing to take away there, isn't it? I think that's when you're actually at the start of your career, you worry about making those mistakes, and you worry about, I suppose, not impressing the right people. But like you say, if you own it, then you're probably going to impress the people you want to. I think you had a question there, didn't you, Jesse, mate?
Yeah, just in terms of how you deal with sort of building, what processes did you actually have in place to overcome these mistakes? Were there any sort of reviews that went on, or was it just a case of, get yourself back together and sort of push on and try not to make the same one again? Was there anything in place at either Raisin or N26, or something that you did personally to ensure that these things didn't occur again?
Yeah.
I mean, there was a combination of things, right? Like when it comes to feedback, it should always be timely. Like things shouldn't come up only in like mid-year or end-year reviews when you've already forgotten about the concrete example of things. So I would always appreciate it if, a colleague of mine would come in and say, okay, in this meeting that we had in the morning, you appear to be a bit more like you were very vocal about certain things, which I get very often as well. But like, you didn't give space for other people to share their opinion, for example, right? Like I would appreciate it if they come and tell me this right on the same day, rather than 2 months later when I ask them for feedback through a survey,
Yeah,
for sure.
Like you say, you need it straight away, otherwise you forget it. I think one thing you touched on there that I'm really keen to probably find a little bit more about, Adriana, you mentioned obviously dealing with stakeholders and I suppose gaining their respect. I think a huge part of an internal recruiter's role is managing several hiring managers and several stakeholders internally as well. So what challenges have you found within, I suppose, not necessarily managing internal stakeholders, what challenges have you found with that, and how do you manage them going forward?
So earlier on my career, especially when you're more junior, you do focus a lot on delivery, right? You don't focus that much on influence or the impact that you make, and just like people tell you to do something, you do it, or people tell you that this is the right approach to it, and you do it. Then, like in Raisin, I was dealing with, if we had a backend engineer, I had to deal with 5 people, right? And then suddenly I went into N26, where we had to, we have the panel of 30, 40 engineers who are part of our interviewing. So suddenly you had to kind of manage all of their different needs, let's say like this, and kind of convince them why is it important for them to review this challenge now and not tomorrow. Why is it important that they accept the interview invite right away and not, us chasing them all the time. So the way I usually manage it is maybe by showing some data as well, and feedback from candidates as well. So they, especially not final hiring managers, but I think interviewers that take part of a process, they don't have exactly the understanding of the part they play in and what might cause if they delay a scorecard, right?
Yeah.
So by showing them, look how long this time to hire was, or that many candidates dropped out because we didn't get back to them fast enough.
Yeah.
And kind of seeing how, it's like a domino.
Yeah, I suppose with that, then it's creating that internal process, isn't it, for everybody? Everybody to
Having
follow.
an agreement of what is their responsibility and what is your responsibility. Another thing is creating the trust that you are there to help them, right? Like you are not, a lot of hiring managers might have had bad experiences with recruiters before, and they see it as just another stakeholder that put things in their calendar and chase them to do something for them, right? But it shouldn't be the case. It should be the other way around. Like, they're the business, they need someone to help them grow and scale, and they need our help and knowledge to get it done. So I would say that it should be the hiring manager chasing us sometimes.
There you go. Adriana's on the fight. She's ready.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to educate my managers as well.
I think you're completely right, though. People are the center of any business, and obviously, as an internal recruiter, you play a vital role in facilitating that, right? And the sooner, if hiring managers understand that, I guess it makes your job a lot easier. And just, I think what would be interesting is, if things aren't going right in the interview process, or, it's evident that there's, things could be improved. How have you managed this in the past with hiring managers and other tech people in terms of improving this, whether it's sort of, moving certain candidates forward in the process or making offers? What have you done in the past to improve this?
I do very often, like not very often, depending on also my time or how the quarter has been. So I used to do like quarterly retrospective meetings. Sometimes now I do it more like half year or maybe just a yearly wrap up, where I do show them a bit of how our conversion rates have been, like our accomplishments in terms of how many offers have we made, how many offers were rejected and why, share the feedback, and identify, what I've seen as blockers. And we also do, as like the agile way of retrospective, where everyone kind of goes around and say what have gone well, what was not going that well, what we need to kind of start, stop, or continue doing. So that's been quite powerful too, to get their opinion across and see if we are somehow misaligned with what we want from each other.
Yeah. How do the engineering managers usually take that feedback? 'Cause I suppose once you're in a role, you don't necessarily expect to get criticized in a way. So how do they tend to take the feedback?
Well, I've been quite lucky for them to be very accepting of it. And be like, wow, yeah, I wasn't aware that this is the effect or the impact that doing this will make to the interview experience or the candidates. So I've been lucky for them to being quite accepting, actually.
And I guess it goes back to that point you made a few moments ago as well, about sort of adding value, and that initial conversation with an engineering manager or someone else in charge of hiring is obviously going to be the difficult one. But once you sort of change the interview process and, either conversion rates go up or, things get better, I guess you're adding value to yourself, and you're giving them that insight that, a talent acquisition partner or a HR person at a company is a pivotal and very important person at that company and to its future.
Yeah, definitely. A/B testing is also helpful, as in if I want to make a bit of a change and in the process, and they're a bit reluctant to do so in the beginning, I kind of saw them. I kind of make them believe that, okay, let's go with this just for a bit, just to see how things go, and then we'll go back and check the data, see how it has worked. And either we stop doing that, we go back to how it is, or we try something else. And with engineers specifically, you do need to be quite concise and structured and analytical. So that's why data works very well with them, and not like feelings, not like feelings, or more of like experience type of things. Like go structure.
I think that's a really useful piece of advice, actually. Something that I suppose we do quite a lot as well, isn't it, Jesse? Because we speak to a lot of, I suppose, similar people to you in all honesty, Adriana, and we find that the facts, I suppose, resonate a lot more with engineers than, I suppose, like you say, that the personal side. I think
the important thing as well is to sort of identify exactly what makes them tick as well. Before these discussions, I think that's one of the most important parts about it. But I think in terms of this, I think we could sort of talk all day. But I think the sort of main, I guess, the key points that I've taken from sort of your experience and the conversation today, Adriana, has been sort of, obviously you mentioned delivery is most important. I think sort of when you're starting out as an internal recruiter, mastering those skills, interviewing, screening candidates, what candidates want to hear. And in terms of your progression, I think that the way that you sped that up and probably moved forward as quickly as you did is probably becoming sort of more strategic in your role, and offering that insight to hiring managers. Have I sort of missed anything, or would you say that's right?
I think in addition to, let's say, earlier on your career, just get the basics across, like in every part of the process. Also, when it comes to candidate experience, at what point are you in contact with your candidates, and always, remain with contact with them, right? And
definitely.
Operationally and practically speaking, there's so many tips and tricks you can find on the internet of, how to be more organized with this. and then later down the road, yes, definitely increase your influence by being a bit more strategic.
Definitely
is a key thing that kind of elevates you further.
Cool. I think, as Jesse mentioned, we probably could. I actually quite enjoyed it. sit and talk all day. I think what would be quite nice as we come to the end now, if you could just, again, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Adriana. I think you're going to hate me by the end of this, but if you could just end with, I suppose, three key tips you'd give anyone, I suppose, looking to progress their career in internal recruitment, what would your, I suppose, three keys be?
Okay, yeah, definitely putting me on the spot here. So stay curious. I would say from day one. Don't underestimate the partnership with your hiring teams or the hiring managers, and also the partnership with actually the team of recruiters that you might have with you. And I would say that it's critical that at the beginning you do work, you're not alone, and you do work with team. And candidate experience, don't underestimate this as well. Go with with your instinct as well as what would, like, you as a candidate, how would you like a process to be, and then reverse it.
Okay.
I find this very helpful, as in treat everyone the same way you want to be treated.
Perfect. So I think, well, three things there then to summarize. So stay curious, make sure you've got great internal relationships with your hiring managers and the stakeholders, and then make sure that, I suppose, the candidate is king in a way, and they're having the best process possible.
Yep.
Perfect. I think, well, thank you very much for joining us, Adriana. I've had a great time. A couple of laughs on the way, which is always nice. So I really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you guys for listening. If you are, and we'll catch up with you next week with some more tips from the Impala Invite series.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.